almost a cliche now to say that startups and entrepreneurs are now the buzzword in India. Every couple of days you see a banner headline or even headlines on TV revolving around something which involves a startup. We know, of course, the big startups, we know the headlines they make, we know the money that they're bringing in, we also know their promoters, they are usually everywhere and cannot be missed and are told very often how they are changing India. What about another group of change makers? People who are working on the ground and of course are also entrepreneurs in their own right. They also are part of startups, many having founded them. But like I found when I discovered and I began reading up on social entrepreneurs, at the heart of their desire to set up a startup is a social cause they want to address through this enterprise. They are people that many say are going to be key if India is going to change its story from here on in the next couple of decades. Where are they from the headlines? Why are they missing? Do we know enough about them? Well, that's what we're looking at today, a very special panel with me. Thanks all so much for taking our time to join us. Priyanka Roy Chaudhary, co-founder of the Wordsworth Project, is here. She builds interactive reading spaces in low resource schools to encourage reading. Also with me, Ashraf, who is, and just pardon me while I get this right, is a co-founder of Commutiny, the youth collective, a community of youth-led organizations. Also PR Ganpati, president of Will Grow Innovations Foundation. They, of course, are an incubator working with social entrepreneurs. And last but not the least, Dhimant Parekh joining us from Bangalore, co-founder of thebetterindia.com, which is an online media startup. Thanks all so much for taking our time to speak to us. Dhimant, I'd like to ask you first. This is a space, an age that we're looking at where perhaps most people are now associating the term startup or entrepreneurs with, say, e-commerce, with the likes of aggregators. Then there is another set of equally key people working in these diverse areas that my panel is now involved in, is today involved in. How do you see the kind of work that people like yourself are doing, and what's been the response?
It's been an interesting change in terms of the ecosystem where we are right now. On one end of the spectrum, you have people building these great startups, huge valuations. And for me, fundamentally, even that leads to social impact. For me, like any business which leads to employment, which leads to creating more opportunities, is essentially creating social impact as well. And on the other hand, we also have people trying to solve more social issues, more issues related to community management. And so I think it's great for the ecosystem that we have this spectrum of entrepreneurs. It's just in terms of what problems you're passionate about solving, and you end up getting bracketed either as a social entrepreneur or as a out and out business entrepreneur. But I've seen this great trend happening in especially the last 2 years. We're seeing that more and more younger people are coming out there and saying, hey, I want to solve this rather than sit down and just crib about it.
Right.
So I think
and that's,
great.
Of course, a very important point. And to my mind, there's some sort of a generational shift there, isn't it, Ash? That there are more and more people who are saying that this is a vacuum. I perhaps have a solution, or let me at least try to fix this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is certainly a growing trend in participation of young people in social action, and that's leading to a generation of more social enterprises. Just to give you an example, we've been doing supporting young social startups for a long time, for nearly 10, 12 years. And earlier, just getting 25 really good startups to support was a real challenge.
I see.
This year, when we set out to support 100, we got 700 applications. So, I mean, that's to me a sense that, it's thriving.
Right. And that's, of course, very, very heartening. Mr. Ganpati, is that sort of your experience as well? And when we sort of see these numbers, is sort of, I would imagine that maybe 700 isn't what perhaps you would sort of like to push or put your weight behind, but the numbers perhaps would be more encouraging than before. The numbers would be still far more than 100.
No, we're definitely seeing a significant increase in the numbers, but I can't say we're seeing a significant increase in quality yet.
Sure.
Like all investors, we look for the top three, the 3 T's as they say, which is what is the problem you're trying to solve, what's the trouble, and then what's the technology, what's your solution, does it really work, and finally, what's the team? Are they passionate about solving this problem? Are they really keen to make a quick buck? And we don't want the latter sort, we want the former sort. I think we also look for social impact. Is this really going to change the needle as far as that particular social problem is concerned?
Right. Priyanka, you are one of those, who've got into this Wordsworth project, looking at a very interesting space on encouraging reading. Constantly, there's so much, hand wringing and chest beating about how there's a whole generation that's just constantly, not reading enough, tech obsessed, just not getting off their gadgets, and where are the books, and they're dying, our books dying, and all of that. And then you come in and operate in this space, but there are low resource schools, like I said, how did the idea come about?
Well, I would say the idea came up about because both me and my co-founder connected on a level that we both loved reading. Now, we call it a privilege because we grew up in a family or in a background which could afford private schools, give us an environment where we could actually love books. But when we went out, and we both are students of economics, and we graduated from good colleges, and we found that, hey, we love reading. What about the rest of us who are not as privileged? Now, it is a big step to think beyond us as well, because we are all into our own career paths. We want to build our own careers. But then, fortunately, we both ended up in the Young India Fellowship, where we were encouraged to think about all this.
Ashra, would it be fair to say that this is, of course, also a generation that's willing to take risks? Where perhaps, or maybe they don't even consider it a risk. It doesn't cross their mind. A couple of years ago, it was different. You wanted a more pakki naukri, or at least you wanted something more dependable, reliable, what ifs to cover many what ifs.
Right.
But now are we sort of seeing a shift there as well?
It's fair to say that yes, there are greater opportunities to jump into and try out, because there's always some sort of a safety net to come back into. That's I think sometimes quite important for an entrepreneur also when they take off on their journey.
I see.
As to, if it doesn't work, do I have a safety net? So there is that.
Do keep that thought. Don't dismiss it entirely.
I think that is there. I do want to place this other thought where, regardless of how easy it is for a certain group of young people to enter into this space, there is still a huge section of young people who are fairly marginalized, for whom this opportunity is not available, because the basic needs are yet to be sorted. Absolutely. And the social conflicts are so high.
Much later, I guess.
But that is an area where significant movement is required.
So how can we reach out there? Because the point that you're making, there's so much else that still needs to be done around them, that this would perhaps not really figure on their list of to-do things, as it were. So there's, of course, got a lot of work to be put there before we can sort of include them or claim that we sort of have reached out to them as well.
I think, to my mind, there is a whole space of enhancing entrepreneurial ability and skills of young people who come from excluded backgrounds, and that can be by very, very specific targeting of these groups in the different regions. And particularly, it's about education. I think the way we look at our education system, I don't think it necessarily promotes the entrepreneurial skills.
Dhimant, there are people who would perhaps look at your startup, and for those who are perhaps not familiar with what you do, the Better India shares stories of unsung heroes, change makers, and innovations, among a whole host of other things. What was the response like when you first started out? I mean, were there people who sort of rolled their eyes and said, why this and why not something else, and why not try your hand at something else? The naysayers are always around, not very far.
Right. Interestingly, in fact, both me and my co-founder are engineers from Bangalore, went to a B school, and after that, while we were working in our conventional day jobs, we suddenly decided to start something like this, purely because we felt that India needs an avenue to talk about all that's good, to talk about these unsung heroes, to celebrate their achievements. And when we started this initially, it started as a side project. A lot of people thought that, okay, it's a good hobby to have, but media in the larger picture is not going to go anywhere. So it's not really something you should take up full time. In fact, 3 years ago, when we were talking to potential investors, they felt that this is not something that can scale up. It's just good to have. But interestingly, by just persevering and building this big platform where we are using the art of storytelling to change lives, people started appreciating this sort of an alternative avenue. And today we're read by more than 2 million people every month. We also secured some amount of funding. We're seeing a lot of interest from a lot of stakeholders in this space.
Priyanka, what was your experience like? Were there long conversations at the dining table every night at home, or did you have to convince your peers, or was it easier?
I guess it happened because we shared the passion. we feel that the idea is important, but if you don't have the team, it doesn't work out, because you cannot do everything single-handedly. We did have conversations. We started out with an idea which was too big. Over the months, we had to narrow it down because we realized we don't have the resources in hand, and we need to gradually step it up instead of just going out there.
Right.
So it does take time.
Right.
It does need some bit of persistence, because you need to make others believe in your idea.
Right.
It's not just us going out there, we need help from others as well.
Right. Many would say, Mr. Ganpati, that would be common to most startups and entrepreneurs, that you need to convince people of your idea. You need to sit across the table and tell the person who you're asking, who's supposed to invest big bucks in you, that, this is my idea, I'm going to make this a game changer. But there are, of course, others. I've been looking at a couple of blogs who say that when we talk about social entrepreneurship, we tend to romanticize the whole idea of, how they're going to burning desire for change and all of that. How would you see it?
I think we are seeing two types of entrepreneurs. I think they're the absolutely fresh graduates who come out with a sparkle in their eye and want to change the world. And I think we need that passion, we need that optimism, but I think we have to temper that somehow with a dose of, the power of the possibility.
Right.
The entrepreneurs have to be much more perseverant, much more patient. There are deep vested interests sometimes in these problems.
What are the sort of what are the personal frustrations that you faced when you sort of look at this work, or seen other people's frustrations? How do you sort of pull them back or let them go when they're at this time? Because I would imagine the challenge is just enormous, which is why we haven't been able to encounter it or change it.
I guess I'm coming from a place where I work with significantly young, essentially young people. So I have a lot of faith in that space in terms of,
more part of your
I
faith.
feel one is, I just want to share, when it's may not be a tempering down, but I think, young startups are so busy in, making proof of concept.
Right.
And there is so much pressure anyway on them to show that, not only to their parents, for example.
Sure.
I mean, there's parents, there's society, there is school, college saying, what are you wasting your time? Get on with it. There are these fancy jobs with 10 times as much pay, all of that. So there are lots of pressures. So what happens is, I think one big challenge is to get a peer group with whom you can interact to really share what you're going through and learn across the peer group. To my mind, that is a very important space that actually is not very heavily invested in. The other is also small investments.
Right.
I feel there is a lot of money, like you mentioned. There are, of course, lots of new resources.
Sure.
And it's wonderful, organizations like Will Grow, etc., investing so much. We also need some people at the first level, where you have very small, like maybe 50,000, 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs, that kind of investment, just to enable experimentation.
Right.
I could relate to most of what Ms. Ashraf told us, because when we started out, we realized that we don't need big bucks, as we talked about, or the huge talk is about the e-commerce people getting big millions of rupees, and we realized that our project did not require that much. But when we went out, people wanted a concept which works, and they wanted a concept where they can invest a lot of money. Even now, we started in January, and it's not even 1 year of our operations. We realized we do not need that much of money. Give us small amounts.
Right.
That's what we need to actually put our work on ground. And if we need more, we will go out there. But that's what is lacking.
Right. So basically, just get us started.
Exactly.
Like, who's asking for all those millions at the onset? Let us try it out and then see what we need to alter.